Hello, NB Poly World. Welcome to the third week of the election cycle. We are into it here. Hard to believe. We only have less than 2 weeks to go. I'm here joined with my co-host Sean Rouse. Hello, Sean.
Hello.
Welcome back to another week.
Thank you.
We are here in Mennequist. I'm here in Mennequist. In St. John. You're there down the street in Quispamsis.
That's right. Yes.
We just had a debate, Sean.
Yes.
I was excited to see a second debate. I mean, the more the better, in my opinion. We're seeing candidate forums. We can talk about some of those. There's a lot going on. The campaign is in full swing for everyone. What were your thoughts about this debate that Rogers just aired, just off the top?
So it was, as you say, it was on Rogers TV and streamed on live simultaneously. So, for example, folks could watch it on YouTube if they wanted to, and which is what I did because I don't have Rogers. And it would have had the three leaders that aren't Blaine Higgs. So it would have had Susan Holt and David Kuhn and Alex White from the NDP. And I'm not sure how those three were chosen, but they
did say that the People's Alliance and the wasn't the Libertarian Party. I don't think. Who was the other one? They said the People's Alliance leader denied and Blaine Higgs denied to come. So that's they didn't even mention the Libertarian Party actually.
Yeah, too structured for the Libertarian Party. They had to wear pants and they couldn't go up and push each other. So it wasn't their ball game. They didn't want to be involved. So so there was 1, 2, 3. So the 6 topics that were brought up. So healthcare, housing, education, poverty reduction, municipalities, and NB Powers. So if you think about the main things that we talk about on this pod all the time, those are the top issues. So I thought it was really well chosen from that perspective to talk about some of what is the most important topics to people who are out there. Affordability was sort of combined with poverty reduction.
Yes.
And I found that Alex kind of conflated the unhoused issue with the housing issue a little bit, which I didn't quite get. But overall, I thought it was, they were well chosen topics and well discussed by all the leaders. So we could get into a little bit about what each of them said.
For sure. I mean, my take off the top is I think Susan's done some work around blunting. Like David Kuhn has been there longer than her, and I've listened to him talk enough times that I can tell that he really knows. He's got some very specific points around healthcare reform that he would push buttons on if he had opposition days and bills that he could introduce. And they have pushed mental health bills, so they pushed some reforms, tried to, and obviously had them shot down. But I found that in this debate, Susan blunted some of his specific critiques, not by pushing against him, but by demonstrating some of her own chops on the healthcare topic. That one stuck out to me. I think that was the first topic they spoke about. David had his same sort of song and dance, really articulated that difference between team care and how we don't have a funding model that will allow that. But I did find that Susan did some good work. She cut off Alex at one point in time and really chopped in there, not in a rude way, but in a way to say, no, look, we're missing something here. And I was kind of not surprised, but I think she's done some work on that front.
I mean, one thing about Susan Holt is she knows her stuff. She has literally been talking one-on-one with people in all these locations on her tours. And not to say David and Alex haven't, but we know Susan has because she's done it very publicly. She's shared the outcome of all these discussions that she's been having across the province and has tried to be really transparent about it. And I know she's getting some criticism for being so transparent. Actually, I think people are saying, you can hold back a little bit and still, be transparent. But
Yeah,
she
leave
has,
something to the imagination.
well, I think people are saying you're giving people ammunition that they can use against you when you don't need
Yep.
to. And I mean, I
Yep.
guess there's a pro and con to that, right? Like people always say they want radical transparency from their politicians. At the same time, there's this podcast that she did, just to try about people who are curious about New Brunswick issues, particularly with the political division that's been happening in the past 16 months. And they invited her on, and I
Yep.
think she was really candid with them. And the PCs have picked apart every statement in that podcast and tried to weaponize it against her in this
Hmm.
campaign and put it, just some of the responses were off the cuff and informal, and they've taken it and twisted it into the worst possible light, as you do in a
Mm.
political campaign. So
Hmm.
uh, again, people are saying, do you need to be so transparent? Maybe that's it's not to her benefit. And in any case, it's that kind of campaign. We knew it was going to be a little bit nasty and very confrontational, and I
Hmm.
think we're seeing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Um, yeah, I also, I wonder about this like candidness and that, we've seen Justin Trudeau go on Nate Erskine Smith's podcast on Commons recently at a national level. He's
Right.
certainly getting a lot of criticism for that, but the guy was already getting a lot of criticism, right? You can't do any more damage. He goes on there. He and Nate Erskine have a fairly self-absorbed conversation as two liberals, but it was candid. They had some moments where, Justin certainly exposed some flanks to attack, but I think the thing about attack is also there's a little bit of strategy in the attacks, right? Like if you show people where you want, if especially I think if you have a strong sense that the public is on side with a couple of issues, even though there's a lot of squeaky wheels out there who will ridicule you and call you all sorts of negative things and throw vitriol your way, having more of that vitriol about issues New Brunswickers either don't care about or don't want to hear about on average actually plays to you, right? It makes you look like, again, the sane person in the room. And I think we saw that with Donald Trump, right? I don't know whether this is Susan's thinking, but it would be, something worth considering if you're a liberal strategist to say, let's get the other team talking about the areas where we want them talking about, right? Because
Oh,
we,
absolutely.
we saw that with Donald Trump, and when they lost Joe Biden, all of a sudden that campaign is still rudderless. They can't land a real blow on Kamala's campaign or Tim Walz, and so I wonder, if there's some of that to it, right? Like let's expose some flanks on the issue we know New Brunswickers are tired of fighting and hearing about, and let's show folks that we're the adult.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, all the things that I don't want to go through and do the PCs a favor of highlighting all of their negative ads against Susan. I mean, they are choosing the things which they know are possibly her weakest points. So her uh, common brand with the federal liberals, we knew that was going to be a weak point that they would target repeatedly, and they have. And
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
this idea that the Liberal Party might be a little bit snooty, a little bit, and if a lot of the people like Susan in particular, if you know her, she's the most down to earth person you'll talk to. But I think they're trying to paint the issue that they're a little bit arrogant, they're a little bit
Mm-hmm.
uh, not the common man, which
Yeah.
is I know something you've talked about on this
Yeah.
pod before. Like,
Well, just the candidate selection specifically, right? There's a lot of
yeah,
missing types of people in the party, but anyway, yeah.
I think they're playing into that. And,
Yeah.
if I think they're pulling all the strings they need to try and get someone to change their mind and vote for Blaine instead. I don't know if that will happen, um, but they know all the strategic weak points, and of course the PCs are doing reprehensible things like playing up fears around renaming the St. John River, which
Yeah,
again has that
yeah,
subtle racism that we talked about last week to it. Why
yeah.
are they bringing that up in that way? To try and pull on those strings that to anger and excite people in a negative way. So,
Yeah. Get them talking about get the peasants talking about the things that don't matter so that we can, leave the things that do matter unsolved, the problems that do matter, unsolved. But
that's right.
back to this debate piece. One of the things I was most surprised about, you go into a debate, they can I think that debates matter only insofar as they are the feeding ground for politically interested, nonpartisan swing voters, right? This is where debates actually do pull some weight.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to move the polls? No. What they will do, though, because I guess the other thing I've heard about some of the polls is that nonpartisan swing voters, people who are like, I don't have a party, I don't really give a, I'll vote for a good candidate or a couple of good issues, based on a party, championing it. From what I understand, those people rarely respond to polls. They're busy. They don't want to be bothered. They listen to the news. They track things from a distance. They have some sort of thoughts about politics, but they don't answer polls. They don't answer the phone for that stuff. They can't be bothered. They don't join parties, all this. So I think that's where the debate matters. And more and more, we've seen some of these polls come out, like Main Street's recent poll. And I was hoping to kind of lean on you a little bit to kind of bring up some more of that data that we got from Main Street. I guess you were teasing it out last week and saying how the TJ was sort of dropping a few pieces here and there, but we didn't really pull out anything from that poll. So if you've got it, great. But I guess my comment on that was, if I were to look at New Brunswick's polls pre-writ, they were off significantly, because we don't do a lot of polling in New Brunswick, because we haven't done wide-scale polling directly after the mess that the PCs fell into. And we've talked on this podcast before as we work through the Angus Reid Forum polling, which actually did do some pretty intensive, but didn't do it at a party level, did it more at an issue level. What is important to you? How do you think the government's doing? What do you think about your premier? And, Blaine Higgs is more unpopular than Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau actually has a higher net positive approval rating than Blaine Higgs does. But yet we're seeing the PCs still hold all of this polling support, but I think it's just because a lot of the same people answer those polls. We have a lot of historical entrenchment, a lot of riding. If you go look at a lot of riding polls right up until this Main Street one, there was no way that you were going to see the same result that they got last time, especially since some of these incumbents stepped down. So it's a long-winded way of saying, I do think these debates matter. I do think the clips that the leaders will put on social media and potentially put money behind will matter. Did you see a clear winner from the night?
No, and I wasn't sure how it was going to go, honestly, because this is, as far as I know, Alex's first debate, Alex White
Yeah,
of the
it's
NDP.
true.
And I thought, well, how is this going to go? Alex White definitely won for the best beard. No question. Superior beard to both
Yeah,
Kuhn and Holt.
yeah.
But seriously, no, I think he did extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
He knows his platform. He was very clear, communicated very clearly to get his ideas across, and I found he was fairly relatable, as was Kuhn and Holt. They all did really well. And I would say there was no clear winner. The biggest loser, of course, was Blaine Higgs, who did not
Agreed.
show up.
Yeah.
And he had some lame reason like scheduling conflict or
Yeah.
whatever. Obviously, these are priority activities for a politician for the reasons you mentioned. They always attempt these are big opportunities to get out there and connect with the public and sell your ideas and convey that impression that you want to leave them with, that you understand their issues, you understand what's going on, you have ideas about how to address them. You might not like all the ideas, or you might hear something new that you never thought of before. It's like, hey, that's a novel idea about how to approach the housing crisis that I didn't realize was an opportunity. So it kind of
Hmm.
gives each candidate an opportunity to show off their chops a little bit. And I think that's where Holt excels. I mean, Kuhn too, and White also did well, but Holt especially knows these files. She's been studying them inside out. She's got her platform committed to memory. She pulls these things out of thin air all the time.
Hmm.
That are her policy commitments that she's been crafting with a team over the past several months. So I think she's really excels in that kind of forum. And why Blaine chose not to show up, who knows? Did he get really bad feedback behind the scenes on how he did last time?
Absolutely.
I
He had
mean,
to have.
that must be it.
They had to have, because there's no other reason to miss something like this than if you think you're going to lose something, right?
Right.
Rogers TV ain't no slouch. Like, I hate, CBC maybe bigger, but local TV is dead in this province, except for Channel 10, the Channel 10 type of TV shows that are held by Rogers. I mean, I was on YouTube at one point in time. There were 200 and some people viewing it on YouTube. That's just on the
Yeah.
YouTube live. We don't know how many people will watch the YouTube post live. I don't know how many people were tuned in to those direct cable TV channels, which you can also see on some platforms. Obviously,
Yeah.
a lot of older people would watch the original stuff. I will say this: my favorite part of the debate, I do have to give to David Kuhn, because and you mentioned it. It's on the housing piece. I am in the middle of these two housing projects right now on behalf of my nonprofit. And I have to say, folks, if you think that the government is putting a foot forward, I don't mean just the provincial government, I mean your municipal government, I mean your federal government. If you think that the wake up call and the alarms going off have sounded a wake up call for government to step in and do something, very unique and targeted and urgent around funding for non-market actors, you're wrong. And David Kuhn really put his finger on it when he pointed out that we need, I think his quote was, we need a boom in building in New Brunswick for the non-market sector completely. Like, I'm in that
Right.
non-market sector. I don't have shareholders. We fundraised from the community to get these two buildings. And here I am, I'm sitting on $76,000 worth of commitment for design and engineering for basically what would be 20 units worth of development on two sites. And I have to act as the bank for the RDC. The Regional Development Corporation wants me to
Okay.
foot the bill for all of that design work from a nonprofit that's annual revenue is just over $115,000, like the Tool Library. And I'm not here trying to pat myself on the back, but I have to say, like, from a very shallow, self-interested sort of perspective. But here we are, right? We've intervened and we've tried to claw back two buildings that were abandoned. We've got partners at John Howard and Coverdale. We are trying to put our best foot forward to put housing on the market for people who need it. And I can't spend the money because I don't have it. So we're trying to find bridge financing. And what we're finding is everybody is creating the same thing. NB Housing, CMHC, they all want to see work finished before they reimburse you. So now you're back to, you can't go to the bank and borrow money, even if you have funding commitments. The banks don't want to lend to nonprofits. So that line from David really stuck out to me. And I do think he's bang on in that. And I wish we would have had, but that's very policy driven. I don't know how many voters are going to hear that and believe it. I know that people believe the housing crisis is important to solve. So, maybe that sways some voters. I don't know.
Right. No, that just stood out to me too. That was one thing I wrote down after I heard that, and that was something unique that no one else raise is this tranche funding from NB Housing for non-market housing. So that was
Yeah.
a great idea. That's
Hmm.
something. The other thing that both Holt and Kuhn mentioned is the uh, the fact that we need more credentialed workers
Yeah.
to get this housing capacity. That there could be more housing projects going if we had more credentialed workers. And they talked about especially people who are coming to the country who have long employment histories in their own country of doing this type of work, having a
Yeah.
really difficult time getting credentialed, which is something, again, that was. I hadn't heard before brought up in this debate. So that was new information for me that made me want to learn more about what those challenges are and how those could be solved.
No, that's a good one too. I agree, and firsthand experience on that front. We absolutely have a very slow pathway for people. We've known this about the healthcare sector. Everybody hears about, doctors driving taxis and crazy, it drives us crazy. There's gatekeeping that happens in the post-secondary world, the credentialing world. Like it costs a lot of money to write some of these tests, and that money pays a lot of wages, and they have a vested interest in making sure they still have a job. Not to be cynical,
Absolutely. Sure.
but that
No, I
that
mean, that makes
that
sense.
is but we haven't heard that on the construction sector before, and I think it's good to start talking about that. Back to your point on Alex White, we spoke when we did our riding by riding analysis. Obviously we didn't score any wins for the NDP, and I think we both said that the NDP, we kind of had this 3% threshold. Do we think the NDP will get more than 3% of the vote or less than? I believe we both said less than 3%.
I mean, they're not really showing up in any poll in a meaningful way right now. And I think the only reason they've showed up in provincial polls previously is, and this was our joint theory, I think,
Yeah.
particularly with the narrative polls, is that it's sort of this transference from the federal scene. So people who are liking what they hear from Jagmeet Singh and Alex actually brought up those languages during the debate today. So trying to
Mm-hmm.
play those up. So I think he's certainly aware of them.
Hmm.
Anyone who has a positive perception of Jagmeet Singh might like him as well. So uh, I think he knows that's there, and it is a brand that has some credibility federally.
Mm-hmm.
Where as opposed to the Liberals, as we talked about before, it's kind of a damaged brand due to Justin Trudeau's unpopularity.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, I think he
Yeah.
tried that a little bit as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay. Yeah. So I think we're on the same page at the debate. I think it hurt Higgs not being there. He has to
Mm-hmm.
win swing voters. I think he won. I think he won last time his majority government because he was hitting home runs on the pandemic, right? And everybody
Yeah.
and we were in a pandemic, and people were gun shy to rock the boat. We're not there
Yeah.
anymore. I think
I,
he needed to appeal to a much broader base than the people who were just jacked up on the red meat of parents' rights and balanced budgets and paying down debt. Like we know those people are out there, and they're going to put a PC sign up, and they're going to be loud on the internet, and they're going to attack, and they're going to have all that. But that's worth probably 20% of the population on a great day, and I don't think he's having a great day. So I agree. I think Blaine is the biggest loser. I think the other parties will get a bump to his loss.
yeah. And if you
Yeah.
think about when that election happened in 2020, it's right after the alpha and beta wave had passed. And, we were in that summertime period. We had New Brunswick Day where we did the chicken dance downtown
Yeah.
and Officers Square in
That's
Fredericton.
right.
And
Yeah.
just before the Delta wave hit, and when the Delta wave hit, that is when NB was really severely affected by COVID.
Mm.
Everything was downhill from there. But Higgs saw the opportunity, he saw a poll result of 80% approval, and he said, it's not going to get better than this, despite the fact we were in the middle of the pandemic. He pulled the plug on his minority parliament or minority house and
Hmm.
decided to go to the polls, and it was rewarded with the majority, as you said.
Is that what he had? He
However,
had he had an 80% approval rating then?
80%, yeah. And that was
Wow.
at the height of his popularity in 2020.
Wow. I
and
did
it's
not know that.
never recovered. Of course, it crashed
Hmm.
right after the Delta wave hit. It crashed, and it kept going down, and it hasn't been above 30. I don't think in maybe 31, but in the past year, it hasn't budged above 31% approval.
Yeah, it's down to 20 some now, 26
Yeah,
or something.
something. Yeah, I think maybe a little higher, but yeah, in that
Yeah.
it's the lowest in Canada right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So one thing I wanted to flip to, and maybe we can spend some time commenting on it. I mean, you know, we're in this campaign. Campaigns matter. I think, we've seen the polls start to move now from where they were. The Main Street poll really dropped some changes. I noticed that interestingly, it dropped changes I wasn't expecting, to be honest, in some ridings. Um, but nonetheless, here we are, and a lot of the riding polls specifically still look like the popular vote, you know, estimates are the same as what the election result was last time. So the riding by riding polls not as telling as the overall sort of numbers that we've seen, but there's been some shifts. And I'm wondering, does some of this spending that we're seeing, and I wanted to kind of take a minute and just go through who is spending money on this election in New Brunswick. And how do I know that? Because Facebook publishes that information. That's right, folks. It is free for you to access. It is called the Meta Ad Library. You can look it up yourself. I downloaded the report from the last 30 days, and here are the top. I'll give you just some top folks, some interesting groups as far as the number one spenders on anything on Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, or any of the Meta universe ads. The Progressive Conservative Party of New Brunswick is spending the most. $27,000 has been spent on boosting ads and running campaigns on Facebook. Susan Holt has spent the second most. It's funny that that's Susan Holt's name. It's not the Liberal Party. It's not PCN. It's like the first one is PCNB, but it does her disclaimers, New Brunswick Liberal Association. So they may just be running money on her page name on behalf of the NBLA, the New Brunswick Liberal Association, because that's what the disclaimer says. They are nipping at the heels of the PCs with 26K. Then there we are, Blaine Higgs, right behind. Blaine Higgs himself spent 16,000. So the Progressive Conservatives are well above almost 40,000 online right now. And then there's these interesting groups that are out there spending money. Not tons, but enough. So you've got Stop Woke Canada. You've got New Brunswick. You've got New Brunswick Proud. You've got Atlantic Prosperity. I don't know that one very well. I haven't looked up the ads. You can go in and look up the ads. So I don't know if that's conservative or not, but it may be. But then you also have the Campaign Life Coalition. They've spent $1,120. New Brunswick Proud, $3,600. Stop Woke Canada, $4,511. So Action. Now, on the other side of that, the progressive side, you have Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights. Now, I did look at their ads. They are absolutely trying to raise awareness about having positive conversations about, people changing gender, people who are queer, people who are, struggling with even just healthcare related stuff, sexual healthcare stuff. So they've spent a good amount of money. They spent $11,000 in the last 30 days in New Brunswick. Wow. So, they're up above the other three combined. That may be, but any comments so far on that before I go on to the candidates? Because the candidates actually are who I find the most interesting.
So is that just the period during the writ that you're seeing, or is that
this is the last 30 days?
The last 30 days. Okay.
That would be the week and a half just before the writ, and then the writ period. Yeah.
So we know the Life Coalition.
Yep.
They're the ones responsible for the anti-trans postcards and the anti-Susan Holt postcards that have been everybody's mailboxes. Now they're a third-party advertiser registered as part of the election. And as a third party advertiser in the writ period, there is a set amount that you can spend, and it's around $17,000, which isn't a whole lot when you think about it. And but how much did those postcards cost just to do a mail drop in a town, say like Quispamsis? It costs around $5,000 to put a postcard in everybody's mailbox. So if you think about the whole province, I mean, you couldn't blanket the province with those postcards for anything less than what, $100,000 a pop, something like that. And they did
Yeah.
at least three, in some cases, four mail drops in New Brunswick. So they, of course, took advantage of the pre-writ period where there was no spending limit and just dumped all those postcards they could into people's mailboxes. Once the writ was issued on the 19th, then they are restricted to that 17,000. So the only place they can really get eyeballs now is on social media with that kind of money. So I think that's their focus now, is just targeting those eyeballs with that amount of money and trying not to exceed it.
Yeah, stop. I did know. I did do a little quick search here. Stop Woke Canada is absolutely just a conservative party super PAC. What we might call that in Canada, because they're a nonprofit organization as long as they have a disclaimer about social issues. Now, they're not running any ads right now. I did notice that. But in the last 30 days, they've spent a fair bit of money there, around $8,000. And the ad library is just filled with extremist woke ideology, Justin Trudeau, Susan Holt, Blaine Higgs is for the parents. But then there's about 6 ads that's comparing, because there's also another election happening in BC and Saskatchewan, right?
Right.
And you've got Scott Moe for the parents, Carla Beck in the NDP, like the Saskatchewan NDP, extremist woke ideology, right? Like you can, and then there's a bunch of posts like Stop Woke Canada paid for. It's just Justin Trudeau looking confused, saying, "What is a woman?" Yeah, so these people are up to no good, folks. Like, you see this stuff, and it's just it's a far right export of the United States trying to get us talking about issues that aren't going to solve any of our problems, but get us fighting among ourselves.
Right. Atlantic
It's
Prosperity. I looked that up while you were speaking as well, and that looks to be like an industry interest group around oil and gas for the most part.
Yeah.
So every story on their website seems to be about energy and oil and gas and prosperous Atlantic Canada. And it talks a little bit about the deep water oil exploration rather off of Newfoundland. And
so not necessarily related to this election of ours.
Issues. Yeah, more about lobbying for industry from the looks of it.
Mm-hmm. And spending in New Brunswick right now is up on the Meta Universe. We are spending more than Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Manitoba. We're up there with New Brunswick and Saskatchewan, then followed by Alberta, Quebec, Ontario, and BC right now, spending the most in Canada, with the BC NDP outspending the Conservatives there by a lot. I think, why does this matter? Why are we going into this? I want to tell you about some of the candidates spending money. And I think maybe you may disagree with me, Sean, on this, but I think New Brunswick is 10 years behind everyone else. And I think whereas social media and its use was perfected by Justin Trudeau's Liberals in the 2015 election, it's taken us this long to get competent at the political level, at the organization level in New Brunswick on utilizing it in a campaign. And I think, I think overall, Pierre Poilievre is certainly spending a crap ton of money on social media, trying to outdo the Liberals, trying to perfect a different brand of social media engagement. But I think this will be the first election where social media advertising and work will have a pretty significant impact on outcomes. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't disagree with that, and particularly, I think these systems that were weaponized in other elections, people have gotten very good at them. It's not hard to find yourself in the middle of a swarm of bots if you're
Yeah.
criticizing Blaine Higgs, for example. Not,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any liberal bots out there that are doing this, so it seems to be weaponized mostly by the conservative interests in this election in particular. And we know that they have some leading spin doctors engaged in, and when I say leading in Canada, some really experienced, reputable people who are engaged at the highest levels of every government in Canada to help them win elections. And they've definitely been brought to bear in New Brunswick. And if you think about some of the social media's influence on the 2016 US election, that was one example. And uh, really interesting movie, if you haven't seen it before, is around Brexit. And it's when
Mm.
they really started to innovate these social media technologies to manipulate and encourage the vote in different directions. And
Hmm.
they really pioneered this stuff in the whole Brexit referendum in Britain. And
Was
it's
that
just,
related to the Cambridge Analytica stuff?
yes, exactly.
Okay. All
So
right.
if you want to
I will
see
watch
how
that. I have not
some of
seen that.
these things work, it is a very interesting movie. Yeah, and
Okay.
it's all about, using social media to connect with people on their anxieties and fears and concerns and what makes them angry about all of those things, and pushing them in a particular direction, and they'll tend to believe things that couldn't possibly be true if you talked to them about it in the right way. Like
Mm. Hmm.
children are getting sex change operations, for example. It's not happening. There are people in New Brunswick who believe that is happening
Oh, absolutely.
because
Yep.
they've been pushed in a particular direction, and they're predisposed to believe such things.
Yeah. Your fears are a bigger motivator in many ways than ideology or anything else. Whatever you're afraid of
Yeah.
is what will. I remember I was very another good movie to watch if you're ever interested in some of the roots of fear propaganda. Is this book called not book? Oh my God! It's the documentary is what is it called? Uh, it's like the politics of fear or something like that. But I remember
Oh yeah,
watching it.
yeah. That
I
rings
remember
a bell.
watching it
Yep.
in university, and I remember like being fascinated with Said Qutb and this comparison between him and Leo Strauss. And Leo Strauss, of course, being this like American neoconservative philosophical professor who taught many of the George Bush era, both senior and junior um, thought leaders and policy pushers and spin doctors, as you say. But they talk about how the way the Republicans have canned fear and utilized it to convince the masses to support them. It very much looks similar to the way Said Qutb kind of raised up the Muslim Brotherhood, which eventually became Al Qaeda under Dr. Ayman al Zawahiri, and how they hold them up and they do these back and forths, and you're like, my gosh, it's like how can these two enemies be using the same tools? But I think we're honed in on this psychology, right? And this is one of the things I guess what I loved about the Rogers debate is that you didn't see these leaders, and you know what? Silas Brown tried to get David Kuhn to do it. David said things like, successive liberal and conservative governments have failed us. That's why we're here. That's a bit of a knife. It's not this big scathing statement, right? Divisive statement. But Silas tried to goad David into it and saying, hey, you say that the liberals have taken, your ideas and put them into their own platform, tell me about it. And David just sort of sidestepped it and went back into here's what we're here to talk about. This is where we see the problem. This is where we see the solution. And they, if we can have those kind of conversations and if they can go somewhere, I think we can recover from some of this stuff. But anyway.
No, I think that's true. That was something that they put out there on purpose to try. And David did take. And honestly, I hear this is one of my pet peeves. That really irks me. And we've talked about this in the past about how you know parties who've never been in government almost
Hmm.
get a free pass sometimes, and parties that have been in government, they get all the blame.
Hmm.
And so it's really easy for a third party who's never had to form a government or govern to throw
Yep.
rocks at the PCs and liberals.
Yep.
Dude, they've never lived a day. They've never had to make a major employer happy. They've never had to uh, adhere by environmental standards around a project.
Hmm.
They get to criticize nonstop. But
Hmm.
when you actually have to form the government, it's and live by the things you're promising, it's a different kind of challenge.
Yep.
And it's frustrating to me when the smaller parties take pot shots, because it's like, if you actually had the chance to be in government, you wouldn't be so smug. The next time around, you'd be like, "Oh, if I say this, I might have to actually live up to it." So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, and I think that's where I get a little frustrated.
For sure. Let's look at some candidates and their spending because this is interesting. Of course, for those of you who maybe don't know this, parties have a certain amount that they can spend as a party in an election period, and then candidates have a certain amount that they can spend for their riding. There's spending limits, obviously. The spending limit, I do believe, is right around 30 some $1,000, 35, 36,
I
some.
think you're right. Yeah, exactly. I think 36 is the number that's in my mind for whatever
Yeah,
reason.
don't quote us, but we're in the ballpark for sure. I know that I remember in 2020 when I ran, it was around 34. I think it's come up a touch. I think it goes up every year with CPI, probably, I'm sure. But anyway, so here's what we're seeing for candidates. So we know Susan Holt and Blaine Higgs are the big spenders. PC Party spending the most out of anybody. Um, Fatine Grisecci. If I were to ask you, Sean, how much do you think she has spent on social media advertising with Meta?
Oh, good
Less than a
question.
thousand or more than $1,000?
That's the thing with her, is she has a following, right? And a lot of people
Yeah.
who share videos. So I would say she has less need to do it. But
Hmm.
but I would guess higher.
It's close, but it is lower.
Really?
I think,
Okay.
they have obviously, Fatine's got involved with Campaign Life Coalition. Don't uh don't pretend she doesn't. I've already, they already tried to sue me once. They can come back and sue me again if they want. They gave up on their lawsuit on me for talking about this stuff. But For My Canada is one of the groups that Fatine used to be leading, and they had, very much multiple wings of this pro-life group that used to do different things. Um, anyway, they can deny all they want that they probably don't sit on the board with Campaign Life Coalition, but it's the same group of people that sit on each other's boards and stand up their own nonprofits and funnel
This
Christian
is
money
where
from
Joanna
wherever.
usually breaks in and hauls us back and says, we're not claiming anything here.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I
We
I
have
am
no
just.
proof of this. This is an
Uh,
opinion.
you're exactly right. This is an opinion. This is what I've seen from my time in the church. These folks being around. This is very much just Brent Harris, not the opinion of council or the podcast. We'll put it that way. Okay, but Fatine is $750. She is the biggest spender of any candidate in New Brunswick. 750 bucks though. Not a ton of money, but
No,
um,
I mean, I
but
would,
already that's 750 spent already. Yeah.
yeah, and if you think about your targeting and riding, so say 20, I think the smallest radius you can do with the Facebook targeted ad or Meta targeted ad is within 17 kilometers. So I know the local candidates here in Quispamsis were doing some advertising, and people, and maybe it was you, Brent, who commented on this, but they were seeing, you see the
Yes,
other side of Quispam's this, and you're like, well, why are you targeting us?
yes,
I
Aaron
think, like you
Kennedy. Yeah,
said, the smallest you can get is within 17
that
kilometers
is
of
true. But you can micro target better than that. And for anybody listening, here's how you do it. Instead of searching by a town, because if you search by a town, you have this you're right, it has this mandatory plus 16 kilometers. You can search by streets, you can search by neighborhoods, and you can focus it down to 1 mile.
I didn't know that.
I didn't
That's
either, and
interesting.
I learned that recently, and I could see
Wow.
I was playing with it on my own on actually the St. John tool libraries, because we used to do boosted posts once in a while. But you can, I don't know if it's recent or not, but yes, the default is 16, 17 kilometers, like you're saying. If you just type in, hey, I want to advertise in Quispam says, it won't let you narrow right into the town boundaries. But if, like, for example, today I searched a road and it allowed me to go within a very small bubble around that road. And I was like, okay,
Wow.
so you can really micro target your sections. But yeah, the default, a lot of people probably wouldn't be able to or wouldn't be tech savvy enough to get in there and do that kind of work. So
That's,
most people are going to be throwing ads, outside their towns or ridings.
hmm.
Um,
So, just for an example, I know Aaron
yep.
has this intersection in town that is quite dangerous. He's made a pledge. Aaron Kennedy, the Liberal candidate here in Quispam, says he's made a pledge to get this intersection addressed if he's successful in the election. And by
Mm,
what you're saying, he could really micro target the people in the
right
neighborhood
in that
around
intersection.
that intersection.
You
That
certainly
is
can.
really interesting. Wow.
Yep. Yeah. If you drop a pin, you have to do 17 kilometers. But if
Right.
you can find, or even a business, for example, if there's a business listed, right, then you can like B&L flooring. I found on Facebook, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, put it on, dropped a pin right on B&L flooring. All of a sudden, I had a 1 kilometer area I could focus it on, and there was like 85 accounts or something. I was playing with it today, so I can
Wow.
confirm. um, Okay, so Fatine is number one. You mentioned Aaron Kennedy. His spending is number three of candidates.
Oh,
Claire Johnson in Moncton South. She spent $648, nearly as much as Fatine. Then we have Tammy. And then Aaron Kennedy. Then we have Tammy Scott Wallace. She's up $500. Then we've got Marco LeBlanc, liberal, another liberal. And Luke Randall spending right around the same amount as each other. Just Luke's just south of 300, and Marco's a little north of it. Then you've got David Kuhn. The Green Party is not spending a ton of money but their candidates are. So you've got Serge Brito, you've got Joanna Killen, you've got the Green Party from Moncton South, you've got
that's
where was the other?
Vincent's, right? Vincent
Yeah,
Moncton.
that's right.
Yeah.
Vincent Morella. Yeah. Then you've got Anthea
Yeah.
Plummer. You've got who's Scott Grant running for? Is he a liberal?
I think he's People's Alliance, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The People's Alliance is here. They've spent less than $100. A lot of people have spent less than $100. You got Mariah Darling. They've spent money here. David Hickey as well. The liberals and the conservatives, the liberals and the Greens, have the same amount of candidates that are showing up spending money. The conservatives have the People's Alliance and the NDP have the fewest. They have like two. But yeah, I found that interesting, right? You do have Green candidates and liberals who are out there banging the drum. So
What was that name again? Peter Graham?
where was that? I just saw his name and I was like, I don't remember who that was or who he's running for. There's Richard Ames. Then there's David Alston and Anthea Plummer. Scott Grant, Riverview NB.
That's who it is. He's the liberal in Riverview. That's right.
He is a liberal. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you got a bunch of folks, right? Terry McMackin's on here, friend of the pod. She's been on here. You do have probably six. The biggest spender of or the most proficient of any PC candidate does seem to be obviously Blaine Higgs, Fatine, then Tammy Scott Wallace, then Jill Green.
Joe Green. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Joe Green is outspending. Where did I see? Oh no, Luke Randall is outspending Joe Green by $60. So they're really close.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jill, pull up your socks.
Yeah,
Come
yeah.
on. You can do
Anyway,
it.
it's yeah, and then Anthea Plummer is also spending some money, but she's just under $100. I mean, nobody's way out in front except Blaine Higgs, right? And
Yeah.
Fatine a little bit, but no, I found this interesting, a little fascinating deep
That is
dive,
really interesting. Absolutely.
and if there's any stories to tell after the election, we might be able to go mine some Facebook ad data and say, hey, maybe this was the thing that changed the game here. So what do you got pulled up here? I got a screen. I'm gonna.
So this is you're talking about the Main Street Research poll.
Yes.
So I pulled it up while you were going through that, just to share what they're saying. So right now they're projecting a Liberal
Hmm.
win of 26 seats, PC's 22, and then the Greens are predicting two losses, so just one
Mm-hmm.
seat, which that kind of surprised me. I don't think either of us called
No,
just one green. So,
no. And the one that they would be talking about here is Megan Mitten. She is the safest green seat by a mile.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, I have seen some of the polling from Main Street, and I have looked at Canada 338 has updated. Now, Canada 338 is saying that there's a swell here between 1 and 4 green seats. They're predicting 3 seats for the Greens. Canada 338 different than Main Street, but yeah,
And this is interesting. They're saying the Liberals have a 77.3% chance of a majority, and
that's the
4 point.
biggest
Go
lean
ahead.
for them. I was just gonna say
Yeah,
that's the biggest lean I've seen of any poll for them so far.
definitely. And then they're saying PC majority only 7.3%, which is,
Yeah,
wow, that is low. That is literally 70 points less than the Liberals. So
absolutely.
these folks are projecting a nice win for the Liberals right now.
Yeah, not a big majority. I mean, in that situation, right, with 26, if any of that's wrong, I mean, if they don't have 26 seats, they don't form a majority, right? If they have 25 and they have to put a speaker in the chair, speaker can't vote. So if they put a speaker in the chair, then they're down to 24, they don't have majority. So it's tight.
Yeah. So we can look at some of these ridings throughout the province. This sort of reminds me of my own map a little bit, but
Yeah. Yeah.
this is cool, definitely up to date. So just if you go around some of these really interesting ridings we've been talking about, like Hampton, Fundy, St. Martin's, they're
Mm.
projecting a slight edge for Heron here, actually,
Hmm.
which surprises me. And what else surprises me, based on the feedback I've heard, is I don't see Laura Myers on the map here at all.
No. Yeah.
They're saying that the PANB is ahead of Laura Myers.
Yeah, you have to wonder about that, right? Because as far
I
as
don't know.
campaign spending and signs and stuff like that, it doesn't look like that's possible for the People's Alliance to do that. But hey, it just depends on who, because they interviewed, I think, 940 people for this.
Oh, you put me on the spot. I'm not sure. I have to look it up.
Yeah, I might be able to find it. Anyway, is there any other interesting ridings
So
that were
that was
toss-ups
one.
that they're calling differently?
This is another one, and someone reached out to me just because I'm in Crispamsis and said, "Check this out." Blaine Higgs' own riding. They're saying it's leaning PC, which is interesting. Leaning,
Mm-hmm.
but folks who can't see this on the screen, 46.5% for the PCs, 44.3% for the Liberals, which is amazing, right? We're talking about essentially neck and neck in the Premier's own riding. So
Mm.
could Aaron Kennedy topple the Premier at home? That would be amazing. I don't think anyone's calling that right now, but
Mm-mm.
that's certainly one to watch. I think it seems optimistic to me. I know the Premier has a lot of support here in his riding,
Hmm.
Here's another one which is really interesting. And if I was going by yard signs alone, I would say this one is way off base because I drive through Rosse every day and they're all Ted Fleming signs.
Hmm.
Very few lawn signs for the liberal candidate. But right here now, they're predicting 48.7% for the Liberals, 42.2% for the PCs, and Zara, the Green, is getting 5.9%. So doing
Yeah.
fairly
So
well. Alison
yeah,
Townsend is the projected winner according to Main Street Research. So I think we can take all these. This is fun for us because we're nerds and we like looking at
absolutely.
data and thinking what if and could they be
Yep.
right and picking it apart. But I think we want to take all these with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I'm looking at this methodology. The analysis says that October 1st to Thursday, October 3rd, 906 adults, 18 years of older. Doesn't say what the breakdown of that is. I've heard it said that Main Street underestimates third parties, and I've heard it said that Nanos overestimates third parties. And so,
Interesting. Okay.
but that's federal. I don't know how that breaks down. I don't know whether it's because of the way they do their thing. I've just heard on the Curse of Politics, and I've heard on the other pod, the Hurley Burley podcast, them talking, like Frank Graves especially will say that, and he'll of course brag about his own polling and how he does it different than them and whatever, right? Because like you say, we're nerds and no one else cares about that.
Well, let's
um,
zoom in on some of these
yeah,
ridings here. And here's Fredericton, the Fredericton area, and they're projecting all blue. So this is
that's insane to me.
Jill Green, and Luke Randall's riding right here, and Anthea's here as well.
They think
Um,
Nicole Carlin's gonna beat
they
Susan
think
Holt.
Nicole Carlin is going to beat Susan Holt. They think she's got the edge.
That's insane.
Is it
Anyway,
true? I don't know. I mean, I go to that riding every day, and then I mean, is it possible that Simon Ouellette is splitting off enough left wing votes that it's going to give the edge to Nicole Carlin? I mean, there is a plausible scenario
of
there.
course, there absolutely is. Yep.
Is it going to
Um,
happen? I don't know. I don't think so, but
yeah,
presumably their polling is based on something. So,
it's based on, like they say, the methodology here. It was commissioned by the Property Main Street Research themselves. They ask the questions like, if an election held today, who are you voting for? They break it down right here for you by age and gender, um, and by education and income. The provincial election held today, how would you vote? Decided or undecided? Most there's 10% of people undecided, right? In this poll that are going to go one way or another. So it's pretty, like, as far as numbers, does it? I'm not seeing any numbers on undecided voters. I'm trying to find that, but yeah, this is all here. It's fascinating. I have to say, I think this is a poll that's getting us closer
mm-hmm.
to some facts, but I still think we've gone from being way off to being still fairly off. We won't have anything close to what the final outcome will be. And this is true about most polling, from what I can tell, that's done pre and during writ. When we get to that last few days before the election, the polls will probably be within 2 to 3 points of the facts. Whether we're going to see anybody put out a major poll, I expect narrative research is going to come in here and drop one on us. I would
Probably.
hope Abacus is going to do one. I would love to see David Coletto's team doing one. I don't know whether we will. But yeah, I think Main Street has some problems with it as far as this polling approach.
Wow.
I
This
do think
other,
it's better than what we had, though. I
yeah,
do believe. Yeah.
this other Fredericton riding, David Coon's riding, Fredericton Lincoln, predicting rather a victory for Daniel Chippen, the PC, and
Yeah.
Joni Legier coming in third at 26.3%, David Coon at 33.5%, and again Daniel Chippen edging him out at 36.9%. So, that's a bold prediction that David Coon's going to lose his own riding. If we
Yeah.
swing over to Moncton and I zoom in here,
Yeah.
so it's predicting a couple of holds. So Moncton South is predicting a hold
Yep.
for Greg Turner, and in Moncton Northwest is predicting a hold for Ernie Steves. Is predicting a pickup in Moncton Center for Rob McKee. I thought
Mhm.
it must be saying it's a pickup because of the riding boundary change. I mean, because
Yes.
Rob
Yeah.
is a sitting MLA.
That's right.
And a safe liberal hold in Moncton East,
Yeah.
which is Alexandre Doucette's running there. And I wonder if they have this backwards because Alexandre would be a pickup um, because that's Danielle Lance riding, and Moncton
Huh.
Center would be a hold because that's where Rob McKee is.
There's definitely some, and that those boundary shifts are bound, no pun intended, bound to mess up some of this polling because even though you switch over the polling boundaries, that doesn't mean that your polling targets, as you try to regionalize and you try to hit some of these places, that doesn't mean you're going to hit that properly either, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
And then just to finish off in St. John, and the reason we're focusing on these areas in the big three cities is because that's conventional
That's where the
knowledge
election's going to be
says
won. Yep.
it's exactly. And
Yep.
that's where the main population is growth has been. That's where the average is 1,600 new voters per riding reside, and we don't know how they're going to vote. So it's really telling what some of these polls are showing. So
Mm.
in Kings Center, which is Bill Oliver's riding, they're predicting a hold, but a strong performance by the Liberal.
Hmm.
Again, we talked about Funday St. Martin's
And then they're
predicting
saying,
a
a red
sweeper.
sweep for St. John, the rest of it, which I don't think is out of the question, but there's no way it's going to be as strong, as safe as what they're predicting here. I just don't
I
see it.
No, this Glen Savoy David Alston race is going to be a lot closer than they're showing here,
Yeah.
based on what everyone is saying. Um,
I do think Dornan will run away with it over Paul Dempsey. And the Greens aren't splitting any votes there with
right,
PJ. But, Mariah and David have been at this before. And they are going to split votes. And Adam Smith is an unknown commodity in St. John Harbor. There's been Glenn Savoy's assistant, and he's not out and about. He's not doing a lot of work. I don't see him on social media. He's just got
no.
signs up,
So
So
for David Hickey, they're predicting a blowout for him at
yeah.
53.6%, and Adam Smith coming in second at 21%, and Mariah
Hmm.
right behind him at 18.7%.
Yeah, pretty hard to imagine that, but
Then
yeah.
West Lancaster, they put Kate Elman Wilcott at 51.5%, Kimi Costain at 34.3%, and our own uh, that we love and adore, Joanna Killen at 10.7%. So,
Which would be worse than she did last time.
uh,
Hard to believe now that she's already been elected as a counselor, but
yeah,
um,
so it
yeah,
is, I guess, I have heard people say they expect a strong liberal performance in the St. John area, and
for sure.
this map would be showing it, and it could be enough to turn the election.
Well,
Uh,
that's counting on it. Like you can see here, you can see where the strong reds are in different places. They need this to do this. Like if Main Street's predictions are right, it will happen because of these four flips in St. John.
right.
So
Excuse
yeah,
me, and you can see Tantramar here, as you said, safe green hold. Again, this is fun to look at and pick apart and say, do you think this is right or wrong? But these are someone's predictions. This is based on a formula, and as you said, these are far from solid assumptions. But you can see the north here all red, the east all red, and central and southwest largely blue. And blue up the west coast as well, or the west side of New Brunswick, and then, as we just said, red in southern New Brunswick. That ends up flipping the elections for the Liberals, according to Main Street. So, what do you think? You heard what Main Street said, and you heard our thoughts on it. Do you have any thoughts on it? Let us know. Give us your feedback on what you see on this map. Certainly love to hear everyone's thoughts, especially if you're in some of those ridings we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we go, Eric Grenier did drop another one. He is not far off this. He is predicting a 25 seat count for, and of course, Eric does a little more of an aggregation in what he does with the RIT podcast. You can go check him out. He's been talking about New Brunswick politics as well. So we want you guys to, consume as much of this as you want, as you desire. But he's predicting a 25 Liberal, 22 PC, 2-seat Green. So just slightly different than Main Street.
That's fairly close, actually. That's closer than I expected between those two.
Yeah, and he's got a more of a sway here. He's got a bit of a swell. So he's saying the Liberals could win anywhere between 20 to 27 seats, the PCs anywhere from 20 to 26, and the Greens anywhere from 2 to 4. So he's saying the Greens can count on 2 wins comfortably and 4 wins at most. But he's saying, look, with these numbers, he's saying that's still not outside the realm of reason that the PCs form a majority government. So
I think anyone who counts the PCs out is being foolish. If they can turn out their vote, they certainly have a chance of winning the election. No,
I have hung my hat on this idea that the PCs are being way overestimated. So I am one of those ones who may be foolish, but I've been saying it since the beginning that the historical data here, and people online have accused me many times, and I can take it, it's fine. But people online have said, Brent, you look at this from a historical analysis and you're trying to extrapolate, logical assumptions about some of this, and that's not how this works. And I'm like, you might be right, but I still say we've never seen a premier lose this many members of his party in a change cycle with a premier that's performing this bad do anywhere near good for the party. So if Blaine does it, it'll be the first time in Canadian history, and I just don't see it's possible. So I am counting them out a little bit. I think that we're getting a loud bark from their side because we're spending so much money, and I think we're all a little convinced by the social media people, and I think their folks are answering the phone and answering the polls, and it's skewing things, but we'll see.
Maybe so.
2 weeks to go.
2 weeks. Oh my God. It's going to feel like forever before this is over.
I know. And then it will be all over in an hour of watching the election night.
Yep.
So, all right, guys. Well, we got to run. Thanks so much, Sean. Appreciate this. We are going to have potentially a guest coming on to talk about the youth vote. I'm not sure who that is yet, but to talk about young people in this province voting on campuses and all that. So that's coming down the pipes. Stay tuned. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to our new Patreon supporter, Mark Rouleau, who came in and said he wanted to support us. We always get Mark. I know he is just this sweetheart. So we corrected our wrongs, and he came in and said, you know what, this is a great podcast. I appreciate what you guys do. You're not alone. You're joined by many of the other Patreon supporters on here. Thank you to you all. We got to run. I got to get my little one, who's probably, he's asleep on the couch now, which is great, but I got to get him up to bed.
Just leave him. Go to sleep. He knows his way to bed.
That's right.
He's fine.
All right, John.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. See you.
Thanks, everyone.